Chapter 13. The Night Before Christmas. On the night before Christmas, it was ASH, all systems ho, in the North Pole. The chocolates inside advent calendars had almost disappeared, and all the elves were making final festive preparations. Everyone was incredibly excited about Christmas. Everyone except for the Christmasaurus. Not only was the Christmasaurus not excited about Christmas, but he was actually wishing Christmas wouldn't come at all. He knew that on Christmas Eve, Santa would be taking something very special away from him and giving it to some spoilt little boy called William, as the Christmasaurus thought of him. Since the night he'd first laid eyes on Santa's wonderful stuffed dinosaur toy, the Christmasaurus had taken it with him wherever he went. He'd even given the cuddly dinosaur a name, Stuffy. He'd taken Stuffy to the ice skating rink and held its hand as they glided around on the ice together. He'd spent hours and hours showing Stuffy his favourite Christmas movies in the North Pole Cinema. He'd taken Stuffy to meet the fairies and the snowmen. He'd shown Stuffy how to roar under the northern lights. And, best of all, they'd sat together watching the reindeer fly. In the Christmasaurus's mind, he had finally found a new dinosaur friend. For the first time, he wasn't the only one. They were completely inseparable. But that was about to change. That night, the elves were frantically loading them into sacks and panically piling them onto Santa's unbelievably enormous sleigh. The sound of frantic elf song echoed constantly around the North Pole as they continually sang the same song over and over and over again, which they did on this night every year. Santa had grown so sick of hearing it that he'd gone to the trouble of making himself some special earplugs that were specifically designed to block out the sound of this particular elf song. Santa privately thought these were the best things he'd ever made, as they meant that he no longer had to listen to this. It was the night before Christmas, the worst night of the year. There's far too much to do, and it fills us up with fear. It doesn't look like we'll make it, but we've brought this on ourselves, so if Christmas doesn't come, you can blame the North Pole elves. It was the night before Christmas, and we're busier than ever before. There are toys up to our eyeballs, and our hands and feet are sore. But you don't hear us complaining, we sing our troubles away, whilst harnessing up the reindeer to the still not ready sleigh. It's the night before Christmas, no time for toilet breaks. We've got microscopic fingers, so we might make some mistakes. But as long as the job gets finished, and Santa gets on his way, we'll be happier than the kiddies getting toys on Christmas Day. Those are just 3 of the 38 verses of that song, which the elves wailed out at the top of their voices. It was quite unpleasant enough to have to sit through the entire thing once, let alone repeatedly until the job was finished. This year, the worst thing about the song was that it meant the time had finally come for the Christmasaurus to say goodbye to Stuffy. Sprout and Snozzletrump came to collect it, but couldn't seem to find Stuffy or the Christmasaurus anywhere. They searched high and low, low and high, until eventually they found the Christmasaurus hiding with Stuffy behind a stack of hay in the flying reindeer stables. The Christmasaurus let out a soft, sad roar, and a large dino-sized teardrop formed and froze on his scaly cheek as the elves slid his stuffed friend out from its hay hiding place. Snozzletrump felt so sorry for the Christmasaurus. He could see just how much this toy meant to him. Even though the Christmasaurus had so many wonderful friends in the North Pole, none of them were dinosaurs, and Snozzletrump knew that was tough. "I'm sorry, Christmasaurus. It's time to say goodbye. It's going somewhere special, so there's no need for you to cry. It'll be loved and cherished just the way it was by you, but a little boy called William needs a friend more than you do," whispered Snozzletrump as he patted and stroked the Christmasaurus. The elves gave the Christmasaurus a hug and took him back to his favourite spot by the fireside in Santa's dreaming den, where he curled up into a sad ball. They softly sang him a lullaby until he stopped crying and fell asleep. Then they quietly took Stuffy away. It was swiftly wrapped in spotty paper with a red ribbon, and a tag was tied to it that said, "For William, from Santa." It was then put into a sack and heaved into the sleigh by 4 singing elves, along with thousands and thousands of other sacks. As the night before Christmas went on, the sleigh was piled with more and more sacks until they were stacked as high as a house, maybe even higher. If you saw it, you would say to yourself, that sleigh will never fly. However, the elves had a clever way of fixing that problem. Once the last sack had been heaved onto the sleigh, 50 fat farmer elves climbed up the mountain of toy sacks until they were on top of it and started jumping up and down. It looked as though the elves were having some sort of silly sack summit party high above the sleigh, but under their feet something magical was happening. The sacks were squishing and shrinking down into the back of the sleigh. With each fat elf jump, the sacks squished more and more until, after an hour of jumping, the sleigh looked as if it had only had one large bulging sack in the back, which fitted nice and neatly into the cargo area behind where Santa would soon sit. The elves cheered and whooped and gave each other high threes as all their preparations were finished. The night before Christmas was nearly over, and all that was left to do now was get some rest. The elves blew out all the lanterns and candles so the magnificently magical flying reindeer could get some final shut-eye whilst they were harnessed to the sleigh. Everyone lay down on the floor all around the giant sleigh, and in no more than 2 seconds fell fast asleep.